All right. Nice to see you guys today. I want to welcome our Henderson location. I want to say a big shout out and lots of love to our Summerlin family, Sunrise Mountain, Southern Highlands, Kingman, those who are joining us in our partnership with God Behind Bars and different prison facilities, 11. Thank you guys for being with us today, and those watching online, those watching on Facebook Live, thanks for joining us. We're talking about how we can be a boss over our finances and our money using biblical principles so that our money and our finances aren't the boss of us. And that's what Like a Boss is really all about. Once a year around Central, we do a financial series and we dig into biblical principles of financial management. And I'm excited every year when we get to do it, and I'm excited for this weekend. It's gonna be a great teaching, I think, for all of us in our lives. You know, it's amazing. You can get just about anything today upgraded to a luxury item. In fact, I even got this, and this just kind of blows me away. This is it's actually a MasterCard that you can get, but it's a luxury MasterCard, the Black Card. This card, no lie, this is what it says on it. You ready for this? You got your seatbelt on? It says that you can get this card, and it is stainless steel with carbon backing. It's a credit card, people, but what it says on it is you can live life without limits until the bill comes. You can upgrade everything today, even your credit card, right? It says that it's a credit card that's filled with distinction for you in your life. And that's part of the challenge of the world that we all live in. Everywhere we go, we see the opportunity to upgrade. There's things that promise to be better. There's the desire for more that just happens in our lives. And we can find ourselves in a situation where we feel absolutely strapped financially. Now, Lori and I, we've experienced this in our own lives. I can remember about 16 years ago, we came to a crossroads. And it was just, we were taking on more and more consumer debt, more and more credit card debt. We weren't doing anything crazy. We were driving old beater cars. You know what I'm talking about. Like, these weren't new cars in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. These were older cars. We lived in a home that literally you could stand in my backyard in Southern California and you could touch the fence. Like, you could have one hand on the back part of the house and you could touch the fence. That was my backyard. This is not big living. Right? It was a townhome, you know, it was like just enough, and we were grateful for it, but it's not like we were doing crazy things. We weren't taking expensive vacations, we weren't doing crazy things, but we never had enough money at the end of the month. And so my solution to that problem for a long time was a solution I think a lot of us engage in. You don't know what else to do. You know you're not living extravagantly, so you take on more. So I was already working full-time as a pastor, so I took a second job teaching at a university. Then I took a third job, and I was speaking everywhere I could, and I was just working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, just working. And you know what? Ultimately, it didn't make any difference. And here's the lesson I learned. You can't out-earn bad spending habits. You can't out-earn bad spending habits. And we didn't have like grossly bad spending habits, but here's the deal. We weren't managing every penny that came into our lives, and because we weren't managing what came into our lives, it was just leaking out all around us. Can anybody relate to that? That was a delayed, kind of choppy clap there, like, oh yeah, that's all too real. I'm just telling you, I've lived it, I've been there. It's a brutal place to live, and it's where a lot of us find ourselves. And so sometimes the solution we think is, look, I've got an income problem. I need to get more money. And that might be the case, but I want to suggest to you today that before you deal with the income problem, you need to deal with the management problem and make sure the management problem is squared up. Because you could get a 10% raise, a 20% raise, a 50% raise. And in many cases, with a 50% raise, it will make no practical difference in 3 months. Why? Because you haven't dealt with the management problem and you're just as broke as you always were. In fact, if you got the luxury black card, you might find yourself in an even worse situation with the stainless steel cover on the front and the carbon fiber on the back. You're living without limits. And so I want to talk to you today about 3 simple habits, biblical habits, that Lori and I have engaged in our lives over the last 16 years that I feel like are rooted in the teaching of the Bible that have helped us begin to find some sense of financial peace in our life. When we began to live these 3 habits in our lives, things started to turn around. The first thing we had to do was we had to recognize that it wasn't an income problem, it was a management problem in our lives. And even though we weren't living extravagantly, we had to make some serious decisions. And we literally went through every single penny we were spending. We cut back like crazy. We cut cable. There was no eating out. We cut everything back in our lives to try and get a grip. I went from working 3 jobs to working 1 job, and we decided we're gonna live on what we have. And it took a while. It doesn't happen overnight. We had to get these habits going in our lives, but what we began to discover, no lie, was peace, a sense of peace. And the peace was we were managing what we had, and I got my life back. I was able to come home and be a dad again. Right? I was able to take care of my daughter at the time and be present in Lori's life as well. And for some of you, you're working multiple jobs. You feel like you're just spinning more and more plates. The debt keeps adding up. You're not living extravagantly, but there's just not enough at the end of the month. And it might be an income situation, but first I want to suggest to you to look at the management situation. You might find that peace is available to you in your life by looking at these 3 simple habits. So I want to do that, but I also want to look at some teaching that Jesus gave us, because we've been in this series, Like a Boss. We were in Luke chapter 12 last week, and we thought, well, let's go to the boss and let's see what Jesus himself says about money, greed, about finance. Luke chapter 12, Jesus gives some more insight. So we're going to go a little higher than the verses we were in last week and look at some of Jesus' extended discussion about money. So if you have your Bibles or your mobile devices, you can follow along. Luke chapter 12, we're going to pick it up in verse 13. We'll also bring this up on the screen, and I just want to encourage you when we get to the red word, help me out, read it out loud here with me. So Jesus is teaching. Guy comes up to him in Luke chapter 12, 13, and basically interrupts him and asks this question. It says, verse 13, then someone called from the crowd, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me." Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Jesus is not having it, right? Jesus is like, what? No way. Then he said, beware, what? Guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. Now, this guy's question, he had bad timing because Jesus is like teaching and he just sort of yelled out and interrupted him in that moment. But it wasn't that religious leaders and rabbis, teachers wouldn't get questions like this. The division of their family's estate would have had certain religious law expectations around that. So he's coming to an expert in the religious law, a teacher, and he's saying, look, tell my brother to divide the estate with me. Tell my brother to split it up. And Jesus, in the situation, sees something more than a money problem, more than an inheritance problem. He sees a heart problem, right? And he goes right to the issue. He goes, hey, I'm not going to be the judge of this situation, but here's what I can tell you. You got to guard against every kind of greed. Now, if you think about it in our life, I remember looking at Amazon, and you can go on Amazon and you can find a list of things that people are looking at and saving for future purposes. And one of the things at the time that was one of the number one things that people kind of had on their list of items that they were looking to get was security camera, some kind of a security alarm system, like the Nest or something where you can kind of look in and see. And so I'm watching all of this. We're in a culture that's all about guarding and protecting, not our hearts, but our stuff. And Jesus comes along and says, no. Here's what you need to beware of. Here's what you really need to guard against. You need to guard against greed of every kind, because life is not measured by how much you own. And how desperately do we just need to hear that again and again in our culture where everything gets reduced to money and power and what you own. Jesus says it's not measured by what you own. So let's look at some habits that can help us get control of our stuff so that our stuff doesn't control us. First habit is simply this, the pay now habit. The pay now habit. Any of you ever been to an escape room? You ever done an escape room where some of you may not even know what this is? I didn't either, but my wife came to me on Father's Day and she gave me one of those gifts that was really more about her than me. You ever had a gift like that? Like I bought her a vacuum cleaner once, but it was really more about, yeah, I know, but it was really more about me than it was her. I was like, look at this cool vacuum cleaner. This is gonna be great. You're gonna love this. She could care less, but I'm like, I'm so glad we got that awesome vacuum cleaner. So I don't like games. I'm not a big gamer because I feel like my life is stressful enough. I don't need the stress of a game in my life. You know, on top of all that, I got enough stress going on for a lot of us. And but Lori loves games. My kids love games. And so for Father's Day, she gives me a escape room, which is like this room that you go into, and there's multiple layers to it, and you're trying to figure out clues together under a time frame, and it's incredibly stressful. And my first thought I wanted to say to her was, look, how about for Father's Day we do nothing and we use this for Mother's Day next year on your day? But I value my marriage and my life, and so I shut my mouth, right? And I said, oh, thank you. And I thought to myself, you just gave me a gift you wanted. So on Father's Day, right before Father's Day, we go to the escape room, and we're doing it together as a family. It's gonna be a fun family moment. I'm really, really, really fighting my horrible attitude and trying to deal with it, you know, and we go in, and if you've never done one of these, like there's all these clues you gotta figure out, and codes and combinations and weirdo stuff and pictures that move and books that come off the shelf in weird ways. You gotta figure all this stuff out. They turn the lights off on you. Things get all funky. At one point they drop like fake snakes from the ceiling and monkeys. I mean, it was like Jumanji. It was like I was trapped in a surreal 3D Jumanji world. And my family's all into it, and I just want to get through it so I can get home to try and get a couple hours to chill out and have a real Father's Day, people. But they're into it, right? And so the whole time, I'm driving my daughter crazy because you're on a timer, but you can basically take a clue and it cuts your time down. You get a ding on your time, but you can move through it faster. And I don't really care about winning this thing. I just want to get through it. So Emma and I are going back and forth. We're fighting. We're bickering. We're all sort of kind of snarking at each other the whole time. You know, and then when we get to the end, like by the end, we finally get out of this thing. None of us will hardly even talk to one another. But this is what's so funny. I had Lori pull this up. This is a family photo we took right after the experience. We looked so happy. And then on social media, she's like, oh, we did a game room. So don't believe everything you'll see on social media. We were not happy right there. I was like, I survived this stupid game. But that's what our financial life can feel like sometimes when debt begins to take root. When we buy into this culture that says, buy now, pay later, right? 90 days, same as cash. You can get the loan and there's no interest, but you read the fine print, you miss one payment or one, you know, you're even low on one payment. I was just talking to a friend of mine. He got a loan. He goes, the fine print says, if you miss one payment, you're late on one payment, your interest rate goes from 0 to 26.9%. Boom. Somebody's making money on this stuff. They're not just doing this out of the goodness of their heart, right? And so we can get into a situation where life starts to feel like the escape room. And that's why finance and debt is one of the number one reasons for stress in our lives and our marriages and our families. We're trying to figure out the code. We're trying to get out of this room into the next. And it just starts feeling like we're moving money around from over here to over there. We're just trying to survive somehow. We're arguing, we're bickering, we're fighting, but there's never enough. And part of the challenge is we live in a culture that is buy now, pay later. We try to separate in our culture the joy of buying from the pain of paying, right? And so you get into this cycle. You get into the debt escape room in your own heart and in your own life. And I think many of us know what that's all about. Lori and I were there. We've lived in that place, and I don't want to go back. And so we made some decisions in our life that I think can be an encouragement to some of you. Some of you feel helpless right now. You're fighting amongst your family. You feel hopeless. You're not sure how you're going to move forward in this place. And I want you to know there is hope. You can absolutely escape from that situation. You absolutely can. It may not be easy. It may not be quick, but you can. I'm living proof of that. And when you do, your life can be filled with more peace than it currently is. I believe that with all my heart, and I believe God will help you. But one of the greatest habits you can engage in is the pay now habit. The pay now habit says, if I don't have the cash for it, I'm not gonna buy it. The pay now habit says, I'm not just gonna whip my card out and put it on my card and deal with my credit limit. Listen, your spending limit and my spending limit is not your credit limit, it's your income limit. Right? Banks, I looked at my bank, I pulled my website up on my bank today. What is it? How much can you borrow? I'm like, wrong question. Because the bank will loan you more than they should loan you. Right? And you can find yourself flipped upside down in the middle of it. So it's our spending limit, not our credit limit. It's our income limit, not our credit limit, that is our real spending limit in life. Now, I'm not saying all debt is bad. The Bible doesn't say all debt is bad. The Bible gives big principles that we should be careful about the debt we take on in our life because it makes you a servant to the lender. Now you're under their power. Now you owe those individuals. Now certainly businesses borrow money so they can make money. We borrow money for homes, even cars, to get to our jobs and our places of work. But when it comes to consumer debt and credit cards and this kind of stuff, not even on lavish things, just on survival issues, we can get into a situation where we just keep basically buying now, paying later, buying now, paying later. And now we're in a situation where basically it's not our income that has determined our spending limit, it's our credit limit, and we're overwhelmed. So Lori and I made some radical decisions. One was we went to a cash system, and we did this for over a decade. We did this for years. And it's hard. It's hard to go to a cash system. Like there's some things you have to write checks for, you have to pay automatically. You know, I get that. But I'm talking about all the other things, clothes, food, entertainment, all those kind of expenses. We went to a cash system and we basically broke it down. And we figured out every penny that we were spending in our financial life, where it was going, and then we limited ourselves to a certain amount of cash for all these expendable things in our lives, and we went to the ATM every week, and we got that much cash, and that was how much cash we had. Now, it's weird. I will tell you, I was a weirdo at the grocery store for a lot of years. People behind me are like, dude, just swipe your card. And I'm like, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. You know, like, I'm counting out the cash, right? But say what you want. If you're upside down, I'm telling you, this can help you. All the studies show that you will spend less if you spend cash than if you put it on the card. Because you think about it, like we take money. I think I got a bill up here. We take money, and when we pull money out, $100 right here. Come on, somebody. It's fake. But we take money out, right? You know, like we've got our money and all this. When you carry $100 in your wallet or your purse, you are a lot less likely to pull that out and drop that down on something. Because what do we say when you give somebody $100? You say, can you break 100? I mean, you break money. Right? When you put it on your card, you just swipe it. But when you give them money, it gets broken because it hurts and you feel it more. And so, you know, people have called me over the years silly, ridiculous. I know it's hard to go to a cash system because I don't do it now because I use a debit card. And I'm able to do it with a debit card because for like 10 years we were on a cash system and we worked this stuff out in our life. But I'm telling you, if you're upside down and it's time to get radical, that's a way you can get radical and it will help you in your life. Cash is king, Dave Ramsey says. Debt is dumb. Cash is king. And so one of the habits you can get into is the pay now habit. Let me just speak to those of you that just feel overwhelmed. Look, Financial Peace University is a great option for you. Some of you are like, I can't afford Financial Peace University. You can't afford not to go to Financial Peace University. So you're like, I don't have time. Look, you don't have time to not go. Get the tools you need to help manage this stuff in your life. And so for some of you across our locations, we're offering Financial Peace University. It's a great next step to really figure some of this out. But Dave Ramsey says, look, he gives these baby steps. And this is exactly what I followed in my life 16 years ago to deal with the debt in our life. So this is uber practical, okay? Super practical. Here it is. I'm just going to give it to you. The baby steps Dave Ramsey offers. Worked in my own life. I believe it can work in yours. First, he says, you start getting a budget together, which means you track all of your spending, every single cent for the next 30, 60, 90 days. Take you about 90 days to really lock in on a spending plan that's realistic to what your needs are. You can get started quick, but you got to be gracious with yourself in those windows as you learn about, oh yeah, I forgot we had that expense, and I forgot I've got to do this over here. And so it takes a while, but in the first 30 days, we started to mark every single thing that we spent. Every single penny, every single place a penny went, I marked it down. And then we paid the minimums on all of our credit cards, just the minimums, and we began to put every excess bit of money that we could into savings until we built it up to $1,000. Look, you got to have at least $1,000 emergency fund, even when you're trying to get out of debt, because something's going to go wrong, right? The car's going to break, the dishwasher is going to break, you name it, right? Something's going to happen. And so we got $1,000 in our savings account, and then we use the debt snowball. And the debt snowball says, list out all of your debts, take your lowest credit card debt and just start paying it off first. And this is where all the math people go, well, which one has the higher interest rate? And I appreciate that Dave Ramsey comes in and he goes, look, math didn't get you into this situation. Now we want to get all math, like, oh, which one has, he's like, and so here's the psychology behind the debt snowball is you take the smallest one because you need a victory, right? You need a win. You need to feel like the ball's moving. He says you take the biggest one and you start paying on it. It might take you 10 years and you're managing all this other stuff. So he says you take the smallest one, put all your excess on the smallest one until you get it paid off. And then when it's done, you're like, victory, we got that done, right? And then you take that money and you roll it up to the next smallest one and you pay on that until you get, and I experienced this in my own life. It's like a snowball. It builds momentum. It starts to move forward. And then you get the third thing paid off. And then the fourth thing paid off. And then the fifth thing paid off. And as you go bigger, things get slower. But now you've built some momentum in your life. And once you get your credit card debt paid off, you can then work towards getting 3 to 6 months in savings put back. But it starts with a habit that says, I'm going to pay now in my life. Look, some of you have credit cards and you get miles and you work points and you're really responsible with that, and that's great. You work the system and you're awesome. But that system exists because most people will find themselves failing in the midst of working in the system, right? The system's getting paid for somehow, and it's getting paid on the backs of people that don't keep up all the time. And so they're working that credit card for points, but then they can't make this month's payment. And so therefore they wait and things start adding up. So in our life, just for us, not gospel, this is just Judd. We cut our credit cards up over 10 years ago. And I have a debit card, but I pay cash. Everything that I can in my, now I'm not talking about home loans, even auto loans if you have to do that. But I'm saying I pay cash for everything else in my life. I don't borrow. If we don't have the money for it, we don't have the money for it. If I need to save money, I start putting money aside. And when I wait until I get that money, come on, that's how our parents told us to live, right? This isn't rocket science. But it'll help you if you get into the habit, the pay now habit. Here's another habit, and that's pay yourself. Pay yourself. So my daughter Emma, she auditioned for and got accepted into this honors performance choir. She did this last year, and they were going to sing a performance at Carnegie Hall in New York City, which was really cool. So I was excited for her. It was like a bucket list item. So I'm like, we're going to pay for this. We're going to go. We're going to be there, right? So she goes. She gets to sing at Carnegie Hall. So we're in New York City a couple weeks ago, and it's like 20 degrees in New York. How many of you don't do well in the cold? You know what I'm talking about? We live in the desert now, people. That's because we're smart. And now my blood's thinned out. Like I do not do well in the cold. It's 20 degrees, so I got my thermals. I had to go get gloves. I got a hat on. I got, all this stuff. And I was gonna walk to the store on my own, and I walk outside of Manhattan, and I'm like, nope, forget that. So I called an Uber, got my phone out, dialed up an Uber, right? I'm waiting on the Uber. The Uber picks me up, and I'm telling you, I thought I was gonna die. This guy is cruising the streets of Manhattan. He's missing people by inches. He's missing other cars by inches. People that, those couriers on their bikes, those psycho courier people, like you cannot pay those people enough, right? They're flying by, and I've seen it on the movies, and I've been to New York, but I mean, being in that car a couple weeks ago, I was just like, this is insane, this is crazy. And sure enough, this big old delivery truck pulls out right behind us and slams into this Uber. And after, none of us got hurt, but, crushes into the car. And this is what I loved. The Uber driver's like, what? What? He throws that car door open and he gets out and he goes, What? And he looks at his car and it's like, are you stupid or something? How could you? I mean, in all of these cars crammed into this uninhabitable space and they're going at a jillion miles an hour, how could you possibly be such a horrible driver that you would hit my car? And then they start going after it, right? The other guy gets out. They weren't throwing punches. They're New Yorkers. They're throwing words in New York fashion, right? Arms are flying, everybody. And I'm like, I'm going to slip on over here, get another Uber now. I'm out. But you know, I thought about that experience because she was so blown away that this could happen. And I think that's how a lot of us, myself included, have spent too much time in our financial lives. We run so close to the line. Hello, we're running like 1,000,000 miles an hour down the street, right? We have nothing in savings. 6 out of 10 Americans have nothing in savings, nothing put back for a rainy day. At some point, you're gonna get hit. At some point, the dishwasher's gonna break. You know, all of a sudden, you're gonna have a medical expense that comes into your life and you gotta deal with that. The unexpected is going to happen, and it's not God's fault when it does. Look, Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble. And so we're to be wise about how we manage our stuff, and saving is very important. And so my challenge to you is, if you don't have anything in savings, start just trying to get $1,000. But Lori and I, in our lives, once we kind of got those bases eventually covered, and it took about 18 months for us to dig out of that hole that we found ourselves in. Once we had that covered, we started to basically just live in a framework that I call the 10-10-80 framework. I give the first 10% of everything we earn back to God. I trust Him with my tithe. I take the second 10% and I save it. And I put it back for future use, whatever may happen. I'm not trusting it for security, but I'm trying to be wise, right? And we learn to live on 80%. And I'm telling you, you might have to cut some things back. You might have to make some hard decisions to live on 80%. But what I found living in that situation is more peace in my life, living with that margin. So pay yourself. Now, in Jesus' story, he's gonna talk about an individual here who put his security in his stuff and in his savings, and he's gonna challenge us with this. Luke chapter 12, verse 16. It says, then he told him a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have enough room to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have what? Enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. So he's got savings, he's got things put back, right? And we might read this and think this guy's a good steward, but there's several things going on in this story. One is this guy already had barns, he already had crops, he already had savings, right? This was in excess of the excess. And he doesn't think about anybody else. He doesn't think about God, he doesn't think about others, he doesn't even think about his family. Middle Easterners who would have heard this story, a scholar, Kenneth Baylor, commentator, says they would have been surprised that this Middle Eastern man is talking to himself about this very important decision, because they lived in these small, close-knit communities, and pretty much every decision in that culture you talk through. Like you have friends, family, and others. So he doesn't have friends. He doesn't have family. He's already isolated himself. And the original hearers of this story would have thought, how interesting that he doesn't have anybody to talk to about these decisions. Because you look at him, he says, I said to myself. He's just talking to himself. I'll just build bigger and bigger and bigger. Luke chapter 12, verse 20. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? See, we want to save for the future. We want to be wise, but we want to be careful not to find our security in our stuff and not in God. This guy's building bigger barns, doing bigger stuff, and trying to find his security in all these different places. God says, literally, it could read in the original language, your soul will be required of you. Now, I want you to think about this. He thought he owned all these barns. He thought he owned all this stuff. He didn't even own his own soul. God did. He says, your soul will be required. Like it's been loaned to you, and now it's going to be required back. Just like your farm's been loaned to you, your life's been loaned to you, your house has been loaned to you, my house has been loaned to me, my car's been loaned to me, my stuff's been loaned to me, my kids have been loaned to me. Everything I have comes from the hand of God. It's all His to give and His to take away. So I'm gonna say thank you, because I don't want it taken away, right? Say thank you, I'm gonna be grateful. I'm gonna try to be wise, but I don't wanna find my security in my savings account. I find my security in God. I save to be wise, but my security is in God. So 3 habits that'll change your financial future. Pay now, pay yourself, and then pay it forward. Pay it forward. Look at what we read in the next verse, Luke chapter 12, verse 21. Jesus says, yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich, relationship with God. You need that rich relationship with God. That's why in the very next verses, Jesus says, don't worry. Don't worry about what you'll eat, what you'll wear. God will take care of you. He says, we looked at this last week, seek first the kingdom of God and trust him. And then Jesus goes on a few verses later, Luke chapter 12, verse 33, he says, sell your possessions, give to those in need. This will store up treasure for you in heaven, and the purses of heaven never get old or develop holes. Your treasure will be what? Safe. No thief can steal it, and no moth can destroy it. Even in my life, when I was seriously trying to dig out of the debt hole, I continued to give to God. It was my way of trusting him in the midst of this situation that I'd gotten myself in, to say, I'm gonna keep putting you first, God. I'm not gonna sort of try to do this on my own and then come back and be generous when I can. I don't feel like I can be generous now, but God, I'm gonna take what you've given me. I'm gonna give my first tithe to you. I'm gonna trust you, and then I'm gonna attack this debt. And God was faithful to our family in that season. I'll never forget it. Listen, God showed me his faithfulness multiple times, but one of the first times was shortly after I became a follower of Jesus. Right after I got out of high school, I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico to play in a rock band. Yeah. Totally broke, right? Some of you know, stupid, dumb kid, right? Doing my own thing, didn't have any money. I worked at a water park, okay? And it kept raining, and when it would rain, we didn't get hours, because it'd rain and you couldn't work. I was on the maintenance crew. And I remember I went to church, and I remember God just convicting me, like I wasn't tithing, I wasn't giving, I wasn't being faithful as a follower of Jesus. And it wasn't about money, it was about my own heart. And I was convicted I needed to do something, but we didn't have anything. I mean, like I was living with a whole bunch of people, 3 different friends. And I mean, like literally I had the gas in my tank, $5 to my name, nothing. And I wasn't getting work hours. But I remember in that moment, I said, all right, God, I'm just gonna trust you because it's not working my way, and what do I have to lose? And so I gave at this church service on a Wednesday night. And I remember going home, and I felt good to give. I just felt relieved. I was like, God, it's in your hands. I'm trying to be on it. I'm trying to be faithful. I'm gonna try to honor your word. And I remember walking up to our little place that we were renting there, and there's all these groceries on the front porch. And none of us knew how they got there. And I never did find out who left them all there. And you can say that it's just random. Look, I've never walked up to my front door again and found groceries on the porch, unless Amazon Prime's delivering. Like it's just never happened. But it happened the night that I took the little that I had and I said, God, I'm gonna put it in your hands and I'm gonna trust you. And after that, I said, all right, God. First I called all my friends. We asked everybody we knew. Everybody's like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm like, I think I know. But I'll keep that to myself. And I'll be grateful, and I'll keep giving generously. When we talk about giving, especially when pastors talk about it, it's so easy to think, oh, the church just wants money. Everybody just wants money. It's all about money because our whole culture's about money. But I just want to tell you, it is more about your heart than anything else. God does not need your money. God will absolutely provide for his church with or without you. He will. But you're gonna miss the blessing. You're gonna miss the blessing. So 3 habits we've engaged in my life: pay now, pay yourself, pay it forward. As we've tithed and given back to God, he's always been faithful to us in our life. Maybe for some of you in your lives, if you're really struggling, maybe it's time to figure out where all that money is going, jump into FPU, Get a spending plan, get a budget, maybe even go to a cash system for a while. Get a grip on that, start paying down your debt, and know it's not hopeless. Maybe for others of you, you're in a place where, God has blessed you in your life, and you've been a pretty good manager of what you have, and you're not in debt, and you're not underwater, but you haven't really trusted him financially. Maybe this is a time to trust God and give to him. Maybe you've been trusting God and giving to him, and you've managed your money pretty well. And here's the kind of next layer of spiritual maturity. It's when you realize that it's not just about the 10% and giving that back to God. It's about the 90% that I'm also living with. And how do I be a good steward of everything that I have? Because all of it comes from God. I don't know where you are in that. I don't know where kind of God might be stirring your heart. But I know these 3 habits have guided us in our lives into much more financial peace, and I believe they can guide you in your life into much more financial peace. You can't out-earn bad habits. Can't out-earn bad habits. So change your habits, you can change your life. Maybe you're here today and you've never really crossed that line of faith. I'd love to give you that opportunity today. If you'd like to become a follower of Jesus, you can simply reach out to him and begin that spiritual journey by repeating this prayer after me and opening your heart to God. So would all of you please bow your heads and close your eyes? Just say, dear God, I thank you for loving me. Thank you for sending Jesus into the world. I believe he died on the cross for my sins. I believe he rose again. Forgive me for my sins. Give me the gift of eternal life. Help me face the challenges that I'm up against. God, I surrender my life to you. In Christ's name. Friends, with every head bowed and every eye closed, if that's your prayer today, if it's your commitment, I want to ask you to just slip your hand in the air. Just to acknowledge you're going to follow him in your life. You're not going to do it alone. You're going to surrender to him and trust him. Just slip your hand in the air. God, I thank you for each person just reaching out to you today. I pray you'll fill their heart and their life with your love and your goodness and your joy. God, may they come to know the peace that only you can provide to each one of us. And may they walk out of this experience knowing they're trusting you, they're forgiven, their eternal life is secure, and their existing today is secure because you've got it, because you hold today and tomorrow. We love you and we thank you in Jesus' name.